Hey everybody, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Thank you for joining us on our season 2 of our podcast, Nonprofit State of Minds, where we pick the brains of nonprofit leaders. We've had some really great conversations, and I expect today to be no exception. We have Witnie Martinez, who is founder and president of oh gosh, Whitney, I am so
It's
embarrassed.
okay, David.
Absolute
It is all
impact,
good.
and a nonprofit consulting firm here in North Carolina. So welcome, Whitney.
Thank you so much, David, for having me.
That happens when you get older. So sorry
I,
about that. I'll
I've,
blame it
I've,
all
I've
on.
heard
I turn 58 next week, so I will blame it on that. But
it's blame it on it, David. Blame it
it's
on.
great to see you again. We just ran into Whitney at the Association of Fundraising Professionals Conference, Philanthropy Conference here, and we were all glad handing and catching up with all of our folks. So it's good to see you again.
Good to see
Hope
you
you
too.
are well.
I am. And how are you, David?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I was a little down last week with a cold, but I feel much better now and getting back
Yeah.
in the groove.
Well,
So
good for you. Good
it
for you.
is. It's good. Well, thank you for joining us. You know, when I met Whitney, gosh, we probably met a year or so ago at least,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
was intrigued by the work that she does, her heart to really speak into the nonprofit community, and also just the skill set that she brings was really intriguing. So I invited her to be on the podcast, and after both of us had some conflicts over the last year or so, we finally made it happen. So I'm excited. Yeah,
I
Whitney,
am
tell
too.
us a little bit about your journey to the nonprofit sector, and then about how and why you started Absolute Impact.
Sure. Well, David, there's a story that only those who are pretty close to me know, that really launched my heart into the nonprofit world. So I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Hmm.
And when we migrated to the US in 1989,
Wow.
we were, definitely a very low income family, um, survived off of food stamps, donations, from others. And those donations are what really sparked, even at such a young age, I was only 5 at the time, my heart for service and giving back. And so again, I was 5, and one of our neighbors, and I'll never forget her name was Donna,
Oh,
had a daughter named Beth, who, as Beth grew older and wanted to get rid of her toys in the apartments where we lived, Donna would just donate them and give them to my mom. And, we had just a few toys, but mostly what she donated was teddy bears and books. And so I found myself, again, I'm coming from Haiti. So at this point, I am a non-native English speaker, right? I
wow.
only knew how to speak French when I moved here. And so those books opened up a whole new world of possibilities, quite
Wow.
frankly, for me. And furthermore, that same year, my mom was working at McDonald's, and, Christmas was not something that we planned on having. I mean, we'd probably pray or go to church or something like that. But her manager at the time donated our first Christmas to us in the US, her
Wow.
McDonald's manager. So I remember waking up on Christmas morning. And even then, right, my sister and I, we got 2 black Barbies, 1 white Barbie. Got kudos to, I think her manager's name was Key, if he's listening to this ever podcast one day. Donated some Barbies to us, a dictionary, stickers, socks, pajamas, kind of just the basic,
Wow.
things. Probably they were probably basic to him, but meant the world to us. And again, that dictionary, propelled my entire, not really propelled my entire, but it really supported, my learning and growth into assimilating myself into a new culture, into a new language. And so those things meant a lot. And as I
Yeah.
grew older and my mom continued to reiterate some of those stories to me, you know, it really sparked an interest in me to also want to give back.
Yeah.
And not just through volunteer work or just through, giving time. And while those things are amazing, or giving money financially, all three, which I do, I wanted giving back to be my lifeline. Like I wanted it
Yeah.
to be the thing that I woke up and did every single day. I eventually got paid for it, joining the nonprofit industry and going into fundraising,
Sure.
I have a background in teaching as well. And so most of the nonprofits that I found myself really drawn to are in the social services, education and arts and culture sectors.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's really, what propelled me into the sector. And as I have grown and my career has progressed in the nonprofit world, sometimes, those interests might change, every couple of years. Well, let me try, working at a museum. Let me try working at a education-based nonprofit just to see
Yeah.
which one really stuck to me the most, which one I had the most passion for. And I could never choose between the two. And so throughout my entire 15 years in the nonprofit space, I've really worked equally with both organizations and also spent a few years teaching as well to kind of
Wow.
bring it all together. But
What
that
a,
is a long, deep story.
no, that's a great journey though. I mean, that the connection is, so inspiring as well. So thank you for sharing that. And, yeah, just what a powerful testimony. That's great.
I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about Absolute Impact and what you do, what impact you make on organizations and what that looks like.
Absolutely. So Absolute Impact, social impact advisory firm, and we launched in December of 2022. And I launched the organization. Again, for 15 years, I spent working within the nonprofit space, helping organizations and being a part of so many strategic and non-strategic initiatives. I tell folks I've held probably every job in the nonprofit sector, with the exception of CEO. And when it came time to move on to that next level and start interviewing for that next level, something didn't feel right to
Mm,
me. When I sat in those interviews, um, it was only, less than a handful of CEO interviews. I knew deep down inside for a long time that I wanted to start my own firm
mm,
and that limiting myself, personally to working with just one organization, having that just be my full-time job, again, which is incredible, for those who are doing it. But for me, it just wasn't the right fit anymore. I wanted to
yeah,
do more. I wanted to help more organizations. And I wanted to work across the sector in a way that I hadn't had the opportunity to do before.
yeah,
So now with, Absolute Impact, our focus is really on helping organizations build organizational capacity through strategic planning for fundraising initiatives. And
yeah,
that looks different across organizations, right? Because you may
yeah,
need to focus on fundraising, but truly you got to get your operations in order. So how do we do that in a strategic way? Or
yeah,
fundraising is actually going great, but we can elevate that if we focus more on your marketing and communications and your messaging, branding, and storytelling. So it
yeah,
looks different across sectors and across organizational missions and needs. But again, the premise at the end of the day is really to help organizations build the capacity they need to grow. And for some organizations, David, that growth may be more money, it may be more staff, or both.
I,
But for some organizations, throughout what this journey has taught me and experiences prior is growth looks like doing less
mm,
so that you can really maximize your impact
yeah,
with the resources that you have. And I saw that while I was a full-time employee and wanted to carry that through into my work, with Absolute Impact and really help organizational leaders see, look, it's great that you have 5 different programs, but the reason why your resources are not being maximized, and of course, this is after we do, the assessment and the feasibility studies or what have you, is because we're doing too much. You're doing too much with
yeah,
those dollars. So if you could scale back and focus on quality versus quantity, right? A tale as
yeah,
old as time, you could really increase that impact. And so that is really the premise for the work that we do and really outlines sort of what we're focused on.
yeah. Well, capacity gets thrown around a lot, right? I mean, even when I'm talking to a client
Yeah.
and somebody or talking to someone in the sector and somebody asks me, what's the biggest problem your clients face? And the two things that I always talk about are limited capacity and limited budget, right? I mean,
Sure.
those are the two choke points for most nonprofits.
Sure.
And I like your point of less is more in that. But first of all, kind of help us define capacity, if you would. What is that? You mentioned it could mean different things to different organizations, but help us really understand so people make sure we're all on the same page of what is capacity and what
Yeah.
does
And
it mean to build capacity?
yeah, David, that's such a great question. And I appreciate what you mentioned about, the word just getting thrown around. You need to build capacity here and there. And,
Yeah,
most people, most resources have defined capacity building as, really teaching a man how to fish, right? If
yeah,
I can teach you how to do something, then you're golden. And that's, I love that definition. It's to the point, everyone understands it, it's
yeah.
relatable. But when I think about capacity building and the organizations that we work with, capacity building is truly about building your organization's stability for the
Mm,
future.
yeah.
It's about sustainability. It's
Mm,
about making sure that your organization is able to thrive beyond you and
mm,
beyond, if you're the leader of that organization, and beyond the team members that you currently have there.
yeah,
That your organization is positioned to grow and thrive. That you have the processes in place, that you have, when we talk about the logistical pieces, you have your processes in place. Excuse me. You have your plans for sustainability, right? Your strategic plan and a timeline to achieve that. And
yeah,
our firm in particular, we've really moved away from, frankly, never needed to move away from, it never started, but the 80-page strategic plan. And I think when you look across the nonprofit landscape and ecosystem, many have,
yeah,
because you create the plan, it gets stuck in a drawer for 6 months, you bring it back out at the end of the year when you're not meeting budget, right? Well, we were supposed to do this. Oh, but so and so quit, so we couldn't, they resigned, we couldn't fulfill that
yeah,
part of the plan. So what do we do now? If that is if that is the premise for how nonprofits are operating strategic plans, right, or operationalizing them, and that is the premise for many, then we're being so much more reactive than proactive. And
yeah,
what we want to do for organizations in the sector is bring them to a place where they can be really proactive about the work that they're doing, right? And so when we think about capacity building is all proactive. It's all
mm,
proactivity,
yeah,
right? Because you're planning, you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about the needs of the organization beyond today. Because it's so easy, David, because I've been there, right? It's so easy. And you've been there, I'm sure, to get
yeah.
bogged down with the day-to-day, programming and metrics that need to be met and the grant writing and the marketing. I mean, the social media posts, that got no
Oh, yeah.
engagement, right? That's where your firm comes in, right?
Oh, yeah.
David. And it's easy to put capacity building and strategic planning to the side. But in order for organizations to become more sustainable and build that sustainability long term, there has to be more attention put towards capacity building.
Yeah. And I think a lot too, to your point about it creating a margin, right? That it gives you room to operate
Mhm.
and not be in crisis mode constantly, right? That
Right,
you
right,
constantly have to meet that budget number every single, day, or else you're not going to be able to operate. And that,
right.
that kind of mentality, that kind of position, um, actually almost fuels the opposite, right? Because you start doing work that's inefficient and you
Mhm.
start being reactive like you're talking about. So
Right,
yeah, I
right.
think, yeah, I wish more organizations had that mindset of,
Mhm.
how do I not just get by, but how do I get more stable, more sustainable? Um,
Sure. And part of that, David, too, to your point, I feel like sometimes it's a catch-22. It's, it really is a double-edged sword, because you're
Yeah.
talking about the need for more money, more staff, or whatever the more is, and currently not having it, but you need to work on those things that you are working on in order to build the more of what you need. And so a lot of organizations don't build capacity, or they're not focused on building capacity because they don't have the capacity to build
Yeah.
capacity. And,
Right.
it's sort of, which one comes first. And I think that's where, when we think about philanthropy, and we think about community partnerships and collaborations with other nonprofit entities
Yeah.
and or funders, I think that's where, the rubber meets the road, for lack of a better term, because that is where nonprofits need support. Nonprofits need those general operating dollars. They need those capacity building dollars. And we, as a sector, and primarily, speaking with funders here, as a philanthropic sector, really need to prioritize what organizations know that they need in order to grow, scale, build the capacity that they need. And what it looks like is going to vary, right?
Yeah.
Because it may be, look, for the next 3 years, yeah, we're going to spend a lot of money on, professional development. We're going to spend lots of money on trainings and conferences and getting our folks out there into the community to make these connections in order for, that piece to be fulfilled. But
Yeah.
what we can't keep doing is the same thing
Yeah.
and expecting different results. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, so much. One word that you used was focus, right? That came to mind, was that so many nonprofits that I've worked with, that we've worked with here at Angel Oak, they have amazing missions, but that they drift sometimes,
mm,
right? Or they see an opportunity for a grant and they choose to pursue it, but it
yeah,
means opening a new area of their organization and maybe losing focus on their original.
sure.
Um, how can an organization avoid that, right? Of chasing the shiny thing, or, there's money over here, so, that may not be what we're doing right now, but if we do that, we might get that money, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's a constant,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of a scavenger hunt almost, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes. It is. You make a great point there, David. And that is what you just named, is the premise for that mission drift. Strategic planning is the premise to be able to avoid that mission drift, and
right.
strategic planning in the right way,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
executing that plan in the right way.
Right.
Because, strategic planning is about, what are we going to focus on, and what are we focusing our resources on,
Yeah.
right? So looking at those priorities, looking at the resources we need to fulfill those priorities, those really are the two key points when it comes to strategic planning.
Yeah.
Now, the key points are a lot easier said than done when you bring in all the complexities and the nuances, right, of
Right.
organizations and all the things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. But you just named, the key factor here. And I think the best thing that nonprofits can do, because we've worked with clients who have been in operation for 10, 15 years and who don't have a current strategic plan that they're operationalizing off of, right? They're
Yeah.
just kind of putting out fires and doing what they think funders want or need, what'll get the next check. And that's a very dangerous place to be in, because as an organization, you cannot effectively build sustainability if you are allowing those dollars to dictate your next set of activities.
Yeah.
Your plan is so critical. Your strategic plan is so critical. You need to create something that you can always go back to and say, is this one of the three pillars that we are to be focused on? If it
Yeah.
is, fantastic, right? And I always tell folks, like, you have your strategic plan. One of the pieces, one of the elements I often see missing in these strategies, they could be as elaborate as we want them to. This is how much we want to raise in the next 5 years. I mean, some of them are so beautiful, right?
Yeah.
You can't take your eyes off of them. But when it comes to actually being able to operationalize them, it's nearly impossible
Yeah.
because what's in the plan needs to be executed realistically by 10 people and you have a staff of 4.
Yeah.
And it's just not realistic. So how can we make, these plans realistic for your organization?
Yeah.
And when I think about this sponsor or a corporate or foundation sort of driven model of philanthropy, that is where the sector, I think in some ways has been shifting away from, right? That is what the sector has been shifting away from in some ways, but we still got a lot of work to do there.
Yeah.
Because there are some funders who just don't get it. They want you to keep, I'll give you an example. I had a client who was in the STEM field. And I remember clearly one of their sponsors wanted to fund a particular program that wasn't working for the community or the nonprofit or the schools they were serving. Because the sponsor, and this was in writing, we love to get the pictures of the kids in lab coats and goggles. It wasn't about, right, I know, I can't make this up. It wasn't about outcomes or metrics or even though the organization, right, just the perception. And we just cannot feed into that pattern. It is a dangerous pattern. And it is one that will scar, organizations when it comes to trying to build that capacity that they need to really thrive.
Yeah. Well, where, a lot of nonprofits, because they are mindful of budgets, are DIY, right? And they just try to do it themselves. But, what's the value of having someone like you and an Absolute Impact to come alongside and to work with them to help it? I know the answer, at least I think I do, but I think it'd be good to hear from you of, really what, I guess one question is, when is the right time to bring in folks like you who can really help steer the ship and help them to understand what is it to gain capacity, how do you do it strategically, what's a strategic plan look like, those sorts of things. So
Sure.
that's one way to think about it. And then the other is, once you're in there, what do you do that maybe they couldn't do themselves?
Yeah. That's a great question. A great 2-part question. So for the first part of that, we offer free consultations, and I have to say, integrity is really our number 1 value. And so we tell organizations if they are not ready to bring on a consultant, we tell them straight out. And for our firm in particular, one of the things we focus on is the willingness of that organization to do some of the very basics that it's going to take to get them to where they need to get to. Because the unfortunate reality, David, is that some organizations know they need to get to point B. But once we've done, our sort of mini assessment during the consultation, and we've answered questions about the donors and the composition of donors, and we look at their relationships, across the community with their funders, their staff composition, their culture is a huge one. The involvement of their board and the willingness of their board to leverage their networks and social capital, in helping the organization. We look at all of these things. And frankly, sometimes we have to do that across 1 or 2 consultations to really get a good understanding.
Right.
And sometimes organizations are not ready because we can't check off not even all of those things, but even some of those things. And sometimes, even though some of those things have not been fulfilled, David, but the organization is willing to work on them. They're just like, look, we are willing to make the investment to work on these things. That's fantastic. We get on board with that, and we provide our full support and backing to those organizations. But we do frankly run into organizations who say, yeah, I know we need to do that, but we just need to do some grant writing right now. And that doesn't work, right? And probably a horrible example, we have a grants partner. Our firm actually doesn't write grants. Or they'll say, well, I know we need a strategy, but we don't have time right now to focus on a strategy. That is not a good partner for us. That is not a good partner for us. David, did I answer the second question?
I think so.
Okay.
I guess another way to look at it, or another, another question would be, um, what is a simple first step that an organization could take to
Yeah.
start moving into a mindset of building capacity?
Yeah.
What is
Oh,
what is a first step? What is that baby step that they
sure.
can take to, to figure
Yeah.
out how to get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think the first thing is, we talk about oftentimes when we're in capacity building or creating a strategy that, includes how we're going to build capacity for the next 1 to 2, 3 years. I think the first baby step that anyone can take within the next 24 hours is to ask themselves or their leadership team, what is the one activity that we do as an organization that garners us the most ROI?
Mm, yeah,
What is, and
yeah,
that ROI can be in different ways, right?
yeah,
It could be the most grant dollars. What is the one activity that we do that garners us most community support? Again, depending on your mission and your current need, you have to
sure.
define what that ROI looks like.
That's a good question.
But focusing on one priority or one
Yeah.
key activity that garners you the most ROI, because that activity will set the foundation for the other things, right? Your
Mm,
nonprofit could be doing or should be doing, but start with one. Just focus on one, get that one right, get your metrics and your outcomes, really define the purpose and your why, right?
yeah,
Behind that one thing, that one activity that could garner you the most ROI, and then stem out from there.
yeah. No, that's great. Um, and there, as we start to wrap up, there's some good resources out there, I know, for some capacity building grants. State
Yeah.
Employees Credit Union has their Mission Impact Grant that they
Mhm,
grant about twice a year, that
mhm,
gives
mhm,
organizations $40,000 over 2 years to help it build capacity. Angel Oak's a grateful referral partner for that program. We get to work with some of those
mhm,
organizations and are grateful for that. And then yeah, I know John Rex Endowment, I know
mhm.
others who also do that. Any other resources that you would want people to make sure they know about to um, just to
Yeah.
help them move forward in their capacity building,
Yeah. Well,
whether
you'll
it's
have to pay
funding
me. You'll
or
have to
other?
pay me for that one, David.
Send me
You'll
the
have to
bill.
pay, you'll have to pay me for that one. But
So,
one thing I will note though, in transparency when it comes to that, because again, our firm doesn't focus on the grants piece.
sure, sure.
Um, but one thing I will note is when we see this a lot in when we help nonprofits with their fundraising strategy, is not being transparent enough in what it's going to take in order to execute program XYZ.
Yeah,
So direct program costs, right, for folks who are actually running the program.
right.
And I will say this about a grant narrative. One of the things that I do believe, and we've advised, nonprofits to put in their grant applications is to be crystal clear that this program will not happen. For example, if David, our program director, is not able to, have 10% of this grant to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
And, having your relationship with the funder helps a lot here as well, having those pre-meetings, right?
yeah,
Meeting where you apply for the grant. Um, but I think being crystal clear about there's no point in me getting program funding for this program if there's
yeah,
nobody to run it. Again,
yeah. No,
back to
that's
that
great.
capacity building. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. And I think, it goes back to the conversation we've been having here, about uncharitable, the Dan Pallotta talk and the
Yeah.
TED talk there, and just, overhead and the myth
Hmm.
and all
Hmm.
of those things, right? It all seems to come back to that at some point, of just what is the mindset of philanthropy in the community and what does that mean? And even nonprofits, to your point, can be their worst enemy when it comes to that, because they
Sure.
they underestimate what it takes to manage a program. And I have no hair, but I try to pull my hair out when people start talking about, well, we only want to fund programs, and I'm like, well, how are you going to run a program without people, right?
Right.
How are you going to run a
That's right.
program without resources,
That's
without
right.
marketing, without a car that needs to get the, I mean,
Right.
just simple stuff, right? So
Yes.
I
Yes.
just, yeah, don't get me started, Whitney. Don't get me started.
We could talk about this all day,
I
David. I'm
know, right?
sure.
Well, we are running out of time, but I appreciate everything. What one piece of advice would you like to leave with the nonprofit leaders who are listening today? Most of them are executive directors,
Sure.
development directors, marketing directors.
Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
you like to tell them?
My biggest piece of advice is listen to your staff. Listen to your staff.
Good.
Create doors of opportunity for your staff to be transparent and open and honest
Mm,
with you and other members of their team, right? And so I think that is um, the one key factor I think I've seen just repeatedly, across the sector. We have a CEO or ED, organizational leader, who is dead set on their vision. It could be an incredible vision, but there
yeah,
is no buy-in from the staff, or the staff really has concerns. And we see that in surveys and assessments that we do. The staff has, credible concerns about that vision or the next step or what they're being asked to do. So take the time to listen to your staff. Input is
great.
key. So that's my one piece of advice.
Very wise, very wise. If people want to find out more about you or Absolute Impact, where can they go to learn more?
Sure, they can go to theabsoluteimpact.com, and we have a list of all of our services there. We'll be adding some fresh resources soon as
Good.
well. So visit theabsoluteimpact.com to learn more about us.
Yeah. Well, Whitney, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your insights, and your commitment to the nonprofit sector. We appreciate that. Thank everyone today for listening. We hope you'll continue to listen to future episodes, and we have a couple of seasons behind us as well that have amazing talent and speakers. So check those out on Apple and Spotify and all those platforms. So
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Angel Oak
David.
Creative would love to have you visit us, angeloakcreative.com. So check that out. So Whitney, thank you. Have a great rest of your day and look forward to running to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Thanks for
All right,
having
take
me.
care now.